25 Pakistani civilians have been sentenced by military courts in Pakistan days after the incoming Trump administration's special envoy, Richard Grenell, took on the Pakistan military junta, in a series of posts on the X platform, formerly Twitter. It was the most remarkable exchange between an incoming American official and the Pakistani military, which has had allegedly good relations with the Biden administration, so much so that the Biden administration has looked away to mass human rights violations, including the detention and arrest of thousands of political activists, including former Prime Minister Imran Khan. In response, the Pakistani American community has, over the past year and a bit, been involved with lobbying efforts uh, in the Trump campaign, basically to convince Trump to change course if he won, and he did. So what does this all mean, and what is Richard Grenell's role in this current saga, which some say is the most remarkable phase in Pakistan-American relations, or the most transformative phase, at least? To get an idea of this, I'm joined by Grizz Ali. He is a Republican strategist and was closely involved behind the scenes in seeing how things were playing out. First of all, Trump winning the Pakistani vote, so to speak, or the Pakistani American vote, Muslims for Trump, another organization, and the role of Richard Grenell. Let's begin with Richard Grenell and what has happened in the past few days between him and the Pakistani military establishment on social media.
I'm just going to be very honest and say Richard Grenell is a close friend of mine. I am not an advisor to him. We actually worked on initiatives local here I'm in California. We worked on initiatives local here to California. But I've gotten to know him very well. And what I can say is, I think, I've said this on social media, but I've worked with a lot of government officials. I've worked with a handful that delve into foreign policy, and I have found Richard Grenell to be, I would say, the most honest government official I've ever worked with, the most transparent, extremely sincere. Right now there's some accusations happening that he's got something to gain by interceding into the politics there, by asking for Imran Khan to be let out. This man has nothing to gain. This man has nothing to gain. And when I've talked to him privately, he just truly believes in a world that's full of liberty, a world where there's governments that really allow for liberty of the people, free speech, free movement, etc. And it's interesting because I was expecting him to be Secretary of State. I was expecting him to be that. I haven't spoken with him about this, so I can't give an explanation on this. But it's interesting because where you see where President Trump, how he's appointed him, I mean, I would call it almost a Falcon-like position. It's like, Richard Grenell, we are going to unleash you. As Secretary of State, I think the thing a lot of people don't understand is the sheer size of the American State Department. The Secretary of State now, it's a much different deal. This is a person who has to be excellent at bureaucratic management. This is a person managing thousands, if not potentially hundreds of thousands of employees. This is a person who might not ever be freed up and really given the free time to exercise creativity within the State Department. So you look at what Trump did with Grenell, and he basically said, I am making you the ambassador and the attaché to every hotspot in the world. Richard Grenell, you get to pick what part of the world you're going to go to with the backing of the State Department, and you're going to solve crises. And Richard Grenell already had a history of doing that from 2016 to 2020, intervening in a lot of the Eastern European conflicts. He did that as ambassador of Germany. Now I think he has a lot more authority. I think he has a lot more flexibility. I don't know this for sure, but I'm sure he probably has even more funding behind him. You look at the sheer amount of people that Donald Trump appointed in 2016 and the number that betrayed him. And it's interesting because Richard Grenell was a George W. Bush pick. I mean, technically, this is a guy that should be affiliated with what I would call the Lincoln Project, Rhino, deep state Republican establishment of DC. But he came in there in 2016, and I think he provided a lot of aid to Trump and helped him to understand the bureaucracy of the State Department, and then became an arm of Trump and really became his best negotiator. And I mean, if you look at the 2016 presidency with Trump, the biggest foreign policy failure was Israel. I don't think we really moved the ball very much between Israel and Palestine. I think the interesting thing, though, is Richard Grenell wasn't involved. And I think in any upcoming negotiations now, I think Grenell is going to be involved. And I'm actually very optimistic because I think because of him, I think we have a chance at making a lot of progress. Getting back to my main point, though, Richard Grenell is just a good man, salt of the earth, believes in God, full of integrity. I personally think, I don't know this for sure, but I think he's really excited about the position he has in the administration. I mean, if you read it, he basically gets to go to any part of the world and resolve conflict. And that's the thing he loves to do most. And I've said this on social media too, that man with the kind of career he has had, you can't work in foreign politics and not have multiple opportunities to be corrupt. And it's usually found out pretty quick when it happens. But this is a guy who has had multiple opportunities to be corrupt and never is.
You mentioned Grenell being a Bush appointee initially, and how Bush's policies after 9/11 were interventionist, foreign intervention policies that bled trillions of dollars, unaccounted for trillions of dollars in Iraq and Afghanistan, on top of the loss of life and other things. And you mentioned the Biden administration, how it has been involved in funding these foreign adventures or keeping certain people in place, for example, in Pakistan. And then Grenell coming in completely, or Trump coming in as an anti-establishment, anti-foreign intervention, America first America force. So how do you square all these different pegs?
One thing I want to say, first of all, though, about George W., and this is why I still think fondly of him, and a lot of people don't realize this. When George W. came into office, so there's 53 Muslim majority countries. I believe it's 50. It's either 53 or 54. George W. becomes president. We had trade agreements. It was kind of pathetic. We had trade agreements with, I think, like 4 of them. We had trade agreements with very few Muslim countries. So the daily engagement between the United States and the Muslim world, it was really minimal. 9/11 hits, and George W. gave his famous proclamation, "You're either with us or you're against us." I think the impressive thing is he used our State Department to interface with every single Muslim country. And he said, let's have a relationship. I want to know what you know about the terrorism occurring, and let's figure out what we as America can do to benefit you. The result of that was, when he was done being president, my understanding is more than half of that list of 53, more than half of those countries now had trade agreement with the United States, including the lifting of sanctions against Pakistan. There were sanctions lifted against other Muslim countries. I think the Muslim world is doing much better today. And I'm not going to say that America is unilaterally popular in the Muslim world, but I do feel like, and Ali, you're welcome to disagree, because I haven't been there, but I feel like Muslim leaders feel like they have an easier time getting a hold of America, that there's a better communication channel, and that America doesn't necessarily come into these countries now and tell them, okay, this is how we're going to do this. I think there's more cooperation. And I think economically, the Muslim world is doing better. Getting back to your question, the interweaving of Trump, then Biden, back to Trump, where we are, this is the best I can say about this. If you read what United States politicians are saying to Pakistan. And by the way, I love Geo News. Periodically, when I'm at a relative's home and Geo is on, I mean, I find it fascinating. So I'm very impressed with Geo. I didn't quite know that it was affiliated with the establishment, so forgive me. That's an ignorance of mine. I didn't know that. When it's on, though, I trust every word.
Well, now you do. After the whole Grenell episode, now you do.
You know, my grandmother who passed away years ago, and she was like a hero to me. That was the main reason I would watch it. Obviously, she's not around, so I don't see Geo as much. I married a Sicilian woman, so she's not going to watch Geo, so I don't get as much exposure to Geo. But when I do see it, I love it. But jokes aside, for people who really want to follow what the American narrative is, we left Afghanistan. It was a haphazard departure. I really don't know who was behind that, but it was a very haphazard departure. What I can confirm, I'm not going to say who I heard it from. There is a lot of heartache in Washington, D.C. that we abandoned the Bagram Air Base. So the goal was to leave Afghanistan. We weren't ever supposed to leave the Bagram Air Base. That wasn't supposed to happen.
I was there. I was in Afghanistan.
Wow.
Last
Okay.
American.
Wow.
From Kabul. I'll share some in the comment section as well. But continue with what you're saying.
So what like I said, I can't share the source, but what I've heard is we were not supposed to give up Bagram. So now this sounds weird. Why do we have an air base in Afghanistan? Hey guys, we have an air base in Germany. We have an air base, I believe, in Japan.
And Bagram wasn't just an air base. Bagram was a detention facility, and there was it had a landing. It had a landing strip. Planes could come in, go out, but the Americans abandoned, or the Allies abandoned Bagram, and also abandoned the U.S. mission in Kabul and retreated to the airport from where they started to leave the country after the Ashraf Ghani government fell.
And by the way, I have a little dog that's barking in the background, so everyone forgive me. Hopefully you can hear me okay. But if I can just explain to the viewing audience, and I think they know this, American air bases, as you're saying, they are like governments unto themselves. They are like full capacity cities. And it's not just that it's an airway where you can land a plane. The sheer amount of infrastructure that goes into these bases, an enormous amount of communications, an enormous amount of infrastructure for refueling planes, accepting equipment, engineering new things. So these air bases are really, we often talk about the British Empire and the vassals and its takeover of land. America is not the British. We don't aspire to be like the British Empire, but we like to have satellites all over the world where we can control or have some kind of authority over that region, or at least have a pulse on what's going on. And then if we need to intervene,
but that changes.
We can intervene with
that changes now, right, Grizz, with Trump coming in, or does
I don't know.
That's the question, and I think it ties into what Grenell is doing right now as well. There are limits to any authority, especially when you're looking at a behemoth like the United States of America, where they have their own interests playing out at multiple levels. So what's the hope then that this policy changes?
I'm not necessarily going to say the policy should change, because I think it's good. I'm still in the camp that I do think, I'll put it this way. I think there are so many entities coming after America, even though I'm a MAGA guy, I'm a Trump guy, but I think there's continuous threats around the world from America. At this point, what I'm going to say is I am not against America having bases in foreign countries, provided that those countries want us there. My understanding is our bases in Turkey, Germany, Japan. My understanding is that we are welcome there. So as long as we're welcome there, I think it's good.
In these countries, maybe, but in the context of Pakistan, what's interesting is that Imran Khan said absolutely not to American bases. And so it's almost a juxtaposition, but it's an interesting insight because on the one hand you have this America first strain and idea. We don't want to intervene in other countries, whatever they're doing. Trump says, I don't want to be in Syria, let them take care of it. And now Pentagon comes out and says, oh, we have double the amount of people we actually thought we did. So the two competing strains here. Talk about that.
So I think that's the number one issue in terms of American foreign policy. And I don't think a lot of Americans actually realize it. But in between, I believe it's Turkey and Japan, we don't have an air base. And the amount of money that goes into keeping a pulse.
In Qatar, you do. It's the largest.
Well, that's true.
Yeah. Al Udeid in Qatar is the largest U.S. military base in the region. And also in this island, Garcia, in the Indian Ocean, the American has a base.
What I've heard, and what I'm just going to say what I said earlier. There was a lot of heartache over abandoning Bagram. There was a lot of heartache. And I think this is me making an assumption, but I think maybe there was more coordination with Bagram and that region. I don't know if Biden just didn't consider that, or maybe they hastily made this decision and then realized, wait a second, we just lost a massive logistical point. But I just know there was heartache. And yes, precisely. I think if you're into Pakistani politics, the story of the last 10 years, I know this. I can't reveal who told me, but America was working very hard trying to get Imran Khan to agree to let America build a base in Pakistan. So that heartache we had that we lost Bagram, please let us build something in Pakistan. And when Imran Khan came out and said, there is no circumstance where America is going to have a base, now suddenly the man is in jail. So, and I can say this is an area I'm pretty sure
and you have Richard Grenell calling for his release.
Well, that's what's amazing. That gets to why I say Richard Grenell is the most honest, sincere government official I've ever worked with. I don't know this for sure, but I do believe in his core, he just believes what happened to Imran Khan. And it's not just what happened to Imran Khan. This is a victimization of everyone who supports the man.
Very quickly, I know you're hopeful. I know things are moving in a certain direction. I already asked you, you think Trump will succeed in getting Imran Khan released? But it's sad. And, we'll have to see what Grenell ends up doing, if anything, long term. Go ahead.
The last word I'll say, the only time I've talked foreign policy with Richard Grenell is telling him, hey, we need to engage Muslims. We need to engage Muslims. And I've told him, the Biden administration, the Democrats, they're failing. Muslims are there. They are there. They're ready to work with us. I didn't even have to coerce him on that. He told me, no, I'm already working on that. And you saw him in Michigan working with the Muslims there. That's why we won Michigan. We won the Muslim vote there. Trump, Grenell, this administration, they are very sincere about working with Muslims. And they don't see Muslims as, okay, you're going to win us Michigan and that's it. They see a partner. They want the world to become a better place. They want to work with Muslims, and they are very sincere about this. So I expect something good to happen. I'm going to go out on a limb. I think Imran Khan will be released. And I think there's going to be some kind of productive negotiation between the United States and Pakistan. I'm not necessarily going to say that the corrupt elements of Pakistan are going away as a result of that. I don't know what happens there. But I do think you're going to see a great relationship between Pakistan and the United States. I think it will lead to the release of Imran Khan. And I think there's going to be great developments. So that is what I'll predict. We'll see how I do. We'll see in 4 years how this goes. But you ask great questions. What a great podcast. You have the world's very lucky to have you.
Bro, I don't know. Well, we'll reconnect again exactly in 1 month on Jan 20th, right? And then we'll see what happens. But thank you so much for your cheers. It was a pleasure. I know you're a busy man, and it took us a while to get this going, but we got 58 minutes in.
I took too long. I'm sorry. I
To talk on. It's all good. People want to listen to this. Thank you again. Appreciate it. Grizz Ali.
nice to be on.
I wouldn't say he's a consultant. He wouldn't call himself a consultant, but he's definitely, involved in what has been happening with the Trump campaign. And now let's see what your analysis will be for the administration.
Thank you, brother. Great to be on.
So there you have it. Please do write and comment on this content, and do subscribe to the channel. Take care of yourself. I'll be back with more. Bye-bye.